right, here we are again. Hello for anybody that's out there. Welcome to another art jam. Looks like we've got a small handful of people in here, so happy September to everybody. I'm just going to lower this music that's playing a little bit, although actually I don't think you would even hear it yet. I have to make sure I'm sharing my screen. Let me get that going. All right. So we didn't have an art jam last week because my internet was out, which was annoying. Actually, no, it was power that went out last week. And then, yeah, that happens. But let's see, what am I going to do today? Well, first of all, hopefully this is working. All right. Hey, Wolf Slade, good evening. Can you hear me okay? Just want to make sure that my mic is on. And I think it is, but just give me a thumbs up if my mic and audio is working. And then let's see, I'm going to go over here. Let's get rid of this graphic that we don't need. You can hear me. Awesome. Cool. Then, all right. Well, then, yeah, we're in September. I've got a couple more art jams before Josh gets back from the Unreal Fellowship. So he's still lost in Unreal Land, but he's getting close to the finish line of doing that. And so, yeah, so today it's going to be me, and then next week it'll be me. And then after that, Josh will be back. And I'm curious to hear what Josh is going to have to say about his experience with Unreal. So as my experience doing the fellowship, it's a bit of a rabbit hole, and you kind of have so much to do that you kind of just stop all communication with the outside world, or at least as much as possible. So I've talked to Josh a little bit, but yeah. And as far as the Unreal Fellowship, for those of you who are, haven't been in the last couple streams, it's just a thing that Epic does, that they've been doing for like a year and a half. And so Epic Games, it's really cool. You can Google it, Unreal Fellowship, and every 3 months they put like, it seems like 60 to 100 people through this sort of free training program that they have. It's like a crash course in Unreal, which is really, really cool. And so I applied for it a few months ago and luckily got to do it. So I started it in May and I finished it in, I guess, the end of June. And as part of the fellowship, you have to make a short, which is obviously kind of tough because you're learning it. Pretty much everybody in the fellowship has never used Unreal before. So I'm still pretty new to Unreal, having only used it since May. And since the end of June when it ended, then I kind of had to get caught up with Gnomon stuff and been pretty busy with that. But anyway, that's what I'm talking about when I say the fellowship. And so today we'll probably play in Unreal a little bit. And I'm thinking I'm going to be playing in Maya, ZBrush, Mixer, and Unreal today, is kind of what I'm planning on doing, I think. But anyway, I think that before I get into that, again, I am Alex. So I'm the founder of Gnomon, which I started a really long time ago. Next year, it's going to be the 25th anniversary of Gnomon. So I guess that means I'm old. But I was also really young when I started it. So I guess I'm not that old, compared to a 90-year-old, I guess. So let's see. Ash Blossom, do I recommend importing objects with textures or separated and adding the textures in Unreal? Well, I might make a model in ZBrush, and then that's going to come in without a texture into Unreal, and then I might texture it in Mixer, and then export those textures from Mixer, and then bring them all together in Unreal. And we'll potentially do some of that today. Roger, that's awesome. DVDs, you're dating yourself a little bit, as well as me, since the DVDs go back a while. The thing that's weird with the Gnomon workshop, so like the school is almost 25 years old, and the workshop had its 20th anniversary last year. And what I still think is really weird is that when the Gnomon workshop started in 2000, it was VHS tapes. And I find it really weird that in the year 2000, we were still using VHS tapes. Like I would think that in the year 2000, we were already using DVDs. But DVDs didn't come until a little bit later. So yeah, it's kind of funny. Here, I'm going to get my screen to get shared. All right, so now my screen is shared. So you guys should see Unreal up right there. And so basically what I have open right now is just a simple scene we made in ArtJam a couple weeks ago. And so just some rain and some fog, which if I just make it full screen, and we can see that it's just a very simple, mostly empty scene inside here. And we're going to bring more stuff into it today is what I'm thinking we might be doing. Now let me get out of full screen. But yeah, and I think before I even do that, I'll show the thing I did for the fellowship. So just so you guys have an idea of the kind of stuff that I do. I mean, I do a variety of different things. Traditionally, before I got into, you know, if I go inside here, you know, before I got into Unreal, let's see, I don't know if this is really the best way for me to show my stuff. Let me go out this way and do it differently. I did a lot of stills. And so this is what I did for the fellowship, this Tartarus thing. But, you know, for personal work, I do a lot of stills, like stuff like this that I did in ArtJam. This is something I did in ArtJam a couple months ago. And so since this was pre-Unreal, this is stuff that's made with Maya. And so this image is something that I made using Maya and some ZBrush and some SpeedTree and then comping it in Photoshop. Josh is not on vacation. He's doing the Unreal Fellowship with Epic Games, and he's got 2 weeks to go. He's done on September 10th, so he'll be back on ArtJam after that. So yeah, so pre-Unreal, something like this, I would do as a still, and really just for fun. What's cool about, and then, you know, the issue of doing it with Maya is you have to render it with Redshift, and that takes time. Redshift is a renderer that I use. There's other renderers that I have used, like V-Ray, which I used for years. Before V-Ray, used Mental Ray. And obviously all these renderers are really cool. It's just, they take a little while to render an image. And so they might be a lot faster than they used to be thanks to GPU rendering, but an image like this might still take, for a 4K render, might take, you know, 3 hours to render or something like that. So it's still something that takes time. So what's been awesome about switching to, and I'll just show some other images of mine. So what's cool about Unreal, obviously, is that it's a real-time game engine, which is now being used by people to do shorts and cinematics, and it's getting used in what people are calling virtual production, meaning that like the backgrounds in The Mandalorian, not all of the backgrounds, but some of the backgrounds when he's like outside in like a desert landscape might be Unreal. That's being displayed on these huge LED screens that are behind the actors. So Unreal is starting to be used in a lot of things other than games. So since it's real time, what's cool is that my hope is that this kind of stuff, which, and again, I'm showing images that are out of Maya rendered with Redshift, that I'll be able to start making stuff like this with Unreal. That's kind of my hope, and have it be rendered in real time, meaning that instead of this being just a still, it's actually an environment that I can move around in. So, so just to be transparent, like I am new to Unreal. I've been into 3D for a really long time, and new tools keep popping up, which is part of what's so cool about being a 3D artist, is that the way things were in the 90s seemed cool at the time, but then Maya came out, and then ZBrush came out, and obviously all sorts of different things over the years. And every time a new tool comes out, it really means that things are just going to get more intuitive or more fun, or you'll be able to get more done as an individual. And so ultimately, this is something that's using a program called World Machine, for example. So like this terrain that's in here is procedurally generated. So this Maya scene, again, this is Maya render, is two planes. So like just two flat planes is what this entire Maya scene is, because the water surface is a plane with a shader on it that looks like water. And then the terrain inside here is a plane that the displacement map that's causing this plane to displace to look like terrain comes from World Machine, and then I textured it using Megascan's textures, which was a while ago, so it was before Bridge. Maybe we'll use some Bridge today also. And then also, while I'm talking about random stuff, you guys are welcome to ask questions if you want to. So it's kind of very casual, these are jams, because I'm just going to chat and eventually hopefully make something. So yeah, so I think ultimately that's what's going on here. So my hope is that I can start to get comfortable with Unreal so that I can start to make things like this in Unreal. And I did make this short, so I'll show that to you guys. Um, and while something like this is mostly using assets that I made, like all of the images I've been showing you are, for the most part, things that I modeled, that I sculpted, that I sculpted in ZBrush, that I textured. With the short, we only had 4 weeks, so it's a lot of stuff that's sort of kit bashed together using things from Marketplace and with some things that I made myself in ZBrush. Anyway, so yeah, so I'm hoping to get better at Unreal. I am not an Unreal master. I'll probably play with it a little bit today, but it's still really, really cool. I'm excited to be learning it. So um, Ash, you just mentioned the trailer for Wukong. So that is obviously really, really cool. I watched that as well. And the snow was really, really cool in it. And no, for sure. It's as a demo of Unreal 5 and what games are going to look like with the next version of Unreal, which is in beta right now, but is released next year. It's crazy. It's crazy what's coming. And it's super exciting. So yeah, let me show you guys the thing I made in Unreal. And then after that, I'm going to probably just jump into Maya for a little bit and then maybe block out some objects, sculpt them in ZBrush, texture them in Mixer, get them into Unreal. Hopefully we can kind of do some of that today. It's kind of like the plan. And Esri, hello. Hello to your mom. Um, and let's see, where can I play the short? There it is. All right, so I'm going to play it and then we'll be back after. So it's a couple minutes. All right, so there you go. So that's the Tartarus short. Tartarus is another word for like Hades, so like the Greek underworld. So the idea that I came up with was based in antiquity, and so we all 100 of the people that participated in the fellowship had to come up with an idea for a short, which was pretty hard in such a short period of time. But so that part was a little stressful. And then having to make something using software I'd never used before was definitely stressful. So it was a month. Um, but those were long days. I mean, I was like, from when I woke up until I went to bed 7 days a week for a month was, trying to learn Unreal and bang things together. So I think the fact that I was able to make that, having never used Unreal before, kind of speaks to how amazing Unreal is, because you're not worried about rendering, everything's real time. And there's this huge library of stuff you can build things with. And so it's not like I made everything in that short, right? You saw the credits at the end. I used a lot of things from Marketplace, which is from Epic Games. Basically, if you download Unreal, which is free, you have the Epic Games launcher. And inside the Epic Games launcher, let me share my screen again. So let's go and share this guy, share. And let's get it to be visible. All right, so now you guys can see my monitor again. So yeah, basically in the Epic Games launcher, if I go and launch that real quick, let's get rid of my stuff. Let me get the Epic Games launcher. And I know some of you have been on the stream before. This is a little redundant, and it's kind of how it goes in the beginning of the stream. I just want to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page. But yeah, this is the Epic Games launcher. And again, for those of you who haven't played with it, it's free. So if you're new to 3D, I definitely recommend Blender, because it's free, or Unreal, because it's free. But Unreal is something to look at as like sort of scene assembly, bringing things together that you might have made somewhere else, meaning that you've modeled things in Blender or in ZBrush and textured them in programs like Mixer or Substance, and then you bring it all together. So in the launcher, if I go to Marketplace, then in the Unreal Fellowship, they basically recommended, grab as much stuff as you can from Marketplace. And it's not all free, but if like today's a new month, it's September. So if I go to free and go to free for the month, then, this is the first time I'm seeing this because I haven't logged in today yet, we can see we've got some, new assets in here for September. Although I feel like these were here for August, so maybe they haven't updated this for September yet. And if I go to library, this is my stuff. So it's showing my projects. And if I scroll to the bottom, you can see my vault. So in the Epic Games launcher, the vault is like all the stuff you've grabbed from Marketplace, some of which was free, some of which I paid for. And so it was basically with all of these, these libraries that come from Epic and third parties who sell them on Marketplace, is how most people built their shorts. And so like the horse that's in my short comes from an asset pack, the character comes from an asset pack. So I still have to assemble it all and deal with, blending, motion capture, and all these things. So it's kind of this hybrid where you're like the director, but and Marketplace is like your prop house. If you think of real movies, people use prop houses and go and rent props and use them to build sets. So it's kind of like, but you also have some parts of your sets you're building from scratch. And I kind of did the same thing. And then of course there's Quixel Bridge, which is free as well, which comes from Epic. Epic bought Quixel. And they have a huge library of assets that are all free. And so you can see tons of models that you can use to build your own sets, games, or shorts like we did in the Fellowship, which is really cool. So there's a ton of stuff in here. So not just 3D models, but also tons of surfaces, meaning shaders and materials. And so there are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of things in here. If I look at the top, you can see it says search 15,752 assets. So that's how many surfaces and models are in here. It's a lot. And again, it's all free if you're using Unreal. So you can see it's got plants. Pretty cool. So that's, as a disclaimer, like how I was able to make that short in a month is basically by utilizing all of these assets. So yeah, so it's pretty cool. And so as far as, let me just get this out of the way. And let's see if there's anything over here. Thanks for the comments, everybody. Appreciate it. And Yeah, toast, the broken marble statues, like those, for example, some of those come from Bridge. So if you go inside Bridge and I do a search for statue, then you'll see there's going to be some things in here. So let's see if I can find something I used. Like I used this head. And so this head right here is something that I grabbed. And what's cool is that when you're browsing inside Bridge, you can just click the export button and it'll export it over to Unreal with the materials and everything, or to Maya, because I used to use this software Bridge with Maya, and then now I'm using it with Unreal. And these are all based on scans. So these are all photogrammetry assets, meaning they're scanned real world objects. So yeah, let me just get this out of the way. And then, so yeah, this is the Epic Games launcher. And then let's go back into Unreal for a second. So basically in Unreal, let me just go make this a little bit bigger. Everything, as we can see, is real-time rendered. So I'm using something called the Ultra Dynamic Sky right now, which I have in my scene over here. So this is something I got off Marketplace. And so it's basically a sky system. So even though it already has sky systems in Unreal, what's nice about the Ultra Dynamic Sky is just that it makes it a lot easier to get your sky, fog, and weather going super, super fast. And so basically, if I click on the sky inside here and I look on the right side, and let me make sure that you guys are seeing what I want you to see. You are. Although let's see if I maybe do that. That's maybe a little bit better for you guys, so you can see a little bit more. Yeah, so basically back in Unreal, on the right, I can see there's all these attributes. It's a pretty long list. I know that my camera is kind of hiding it, but you get the idea. It's a long list of attributes that are controlling the sky. And then if I click on the weather, then I've got all of these attributes in here that are controlling the weather. So it's got presets. So I can go to weather type and change it to, let's say, thunderstorm. And then now if I deselect and I go in here, cruise around, then it will have lightning. Although we might have to wait a little bit to see it. There we go. So I don't know if you guys saw that lightning flash. So that's what's awesome about it, is that it's got like things that are already set up for you that you can do yourself. And that's what's cool about Marketplace. It's just full of these things that you can use as a start point, and then you can kind of take it apart and use it to, your own needs. And so if I'll get out of play mode, deselect that, go back to the weather. So that was me choosing thunderstorm. If I go to snow, and then now we can see we've got snow falling inside here. And then I can just click play and cruise around with my dude. And then it also has materials that I don't have set up in the scene. So you can see like the snow is falling on the ground, but I can actually set up materials via the Ultra Dynamic Sky system so that it has layered shaders so that snow is, falling on top of objects, or rather it's got layered shaders. So really, really cool. And so I'm just going to go back to weather type light rain. And then if I go to the sky, then in here where there's all these attributes, there's attributes for the fog. So I'm going to have to scroll for a second to find them because there's so many. So here we go. So I've got height fog. And so it's kind of based on the standard Unreal height fog. But if I go inside here and play with the density, you can see that I can basically turn the fog off, or I can just change that slider. I'm just basically click dragging on that little attribute right there and changing the fog density. And so what's nice is just how interactive it is. And it's volumetric as well, so it can react to light and have light shafts and all that kind of stuff. Really, really cool. So yeah, so that's the sky system that's inside here. And so I think what I'm gonna do is maybe, try a workflow where I might block out some things in Maya, kind of like how I've usually done when I'm blocking out like an image, and then sculpt those in ZBrush, texture them in Mixer, and we'll see how far I can get today with that stuff. Leo Taurus, specs required for this kind of computing. I mean, really, if you think of any PC that has a GeForce card in it, whether it's like a 980 up to like a 3080, those are really the recommended cards these days, like NVIDIA cards. So if you have a PC that has an NVIDIA card in it, you should be fine to run Unreal as long as that card is, within the last like 4 or 5 years. Really, the only difference is the newer cards are RTX cards, which means that they do ray tracing, which is for reflections. But like the short that I showed you, I didn't have ray tracing on for that. It doesn't have any, and it's fine. So there's a lot you can do if you do not have an RTX card. So the card that I have in my machine is a 2080 card, 2080 Ti. So it's not one of the newest cards, and everything's totally fine. So this PC, I'm using a Lenovo workstation. So it is a good computer, obviously, since this is what I do for a living. Then investing in a good computer is a good idea. So this is a Lenovo workstation. It's got a lot of RAM. That just allows me to have a lot of programs open at the same time. That's really the big thing about RAM. So like if I go down here, get it to be, I've got like Mixer, ZBrush, Bridge, Unreal, the launcher, and Maya all running right now. And that's kind of RAM related. And so, if I go and open up Task Manager, so you can see what my Task Manager looks like, you can see I've got a lot of RAM, so like 100 gigs of RAM. And, well, actually, that's what's free. I actually have 192 gigs of RAM, so it's a lot of RAM. Don't need that much. Every computer I've had before this computer had 32 gigs of RAM, and I was always fine. It's just this is a computer I got like a year and a half ago, and I just decided to splurge to get a lot of RAM, just so I don't have to close programs all the time. It is nice, but it's not necessary. So have a good graphics card, and then if you can, have a fast hard drive like an SSD, because that makes a big difference, just for loading in textures and stuff like that. Yeah, AMD cards, I mean, I haven't used them, and I'm sure they're fine. And for people that are on a Mac, that's kind of what you need. There were some people in the fellowship on a Mac. I'm just PC based just because I feel that PCs are way more cost effective than Macs. I think Apple's pricing is insane. I don't understand it. Their towers are really expensive. They're good computers. I have nothing against the computers. I just think they're overpriced, basically. So you'll find because of that reason, a lot of people are at studios or PC based, because if you're a studio and you need to buy like 100 machines or 1,000 machines, imagine if you're Weta or ILM, and you literally, or Blizzard, and you literally are buying like upgrading 2,000 computers every 3 years. The difference between a Mac and a PC from a price perspective becomes millions of dollars. So you'll just find that most studios are PC based. But there's nothing wrong if you have a Mac and you're learning on a Mac, because Maya on a Mac and Maya on a PC, it's the same software. And I'm just going to scan comments because otherwise I miss some. Liquid, trying to get an Unreal lately and really wondering if landscape sculpting is just meant for open world levels and not linear environments that you'd see in a FPS, for example. Yeah, I think that you're right, that the landscape sculpting seems to be primarily geared towards open world, because of some of the features that are embedded in the landscape tool in Unreal, and the ability to have tiles and import tile sets from programs like World Machine, where you could create an environment that's 100 miles by 100 miles and have it dynamically load in those tiles as you're going across the landscape. And so for an open world game, that's going to be important. But for people that are doing, like you said, like a closed environment, like an FPS, like Overwatch, or people that are making shorts like I did, then it's kind of easier to just model everything yourself in like your DCC, meaning like Maya or ZBrush or Blender or whatever, and just build all of your models and your third-party app. From what I understand. And let's see, just scanning. And all right, cool. So yeah, so I think that if I jump out of Unreal for a second and I go over to Maya, and so let's go over here. Now, it's going to take my brain a second to switch to the Maya viewport and Maya navigation because it's a little bit different. So obviously Maya is not as pretty looking as Unreal as far as the viewport, and that's the one thing when you start learning Unreal, that the viewport's so awesome looking, and then you go back to Maya and you're like, oh, but whatever. Maya's still awesome. And so in here, if I was to like block out environments in Maya and whatnot, especially if I was sketching or doodling with Maya, I have a bunch of shelves that have my own asset library. And so whether it's these people that are just from renderpeople.com, or whether I go through here and see things that I scanned myself, I've done a lot of photogrammetry, and which again is making a 3D model from photographs. So if I go and click on one of these, it's going to load in a model. And this is something that is a scan that I did of like a cliff wall on a hike that I did in an area called Ladder Canyon, which is like 2 hours away from Los Angeles. And if I go and open up my render view window and hit render, then it's going to take Redshift a second to wake up. And hopefully it sees its license. There we go. So what we're looking at there is a render of this asset. And you can see, like, Redshift is still pretty fast. It's not, obviously like cruising around at 60 frames per second in Unreal. But that's also because what we're looking at here is a ray tracer. And so that image, everything is 100% ray traced, including, the shadows and the lighting and all of that kind of stuff. And so it looks super nice and super sharp and super accurate as far as a render. And that's something that is nice. And, before GPU renderers, what we're doing right here would have been impossible. So just the fact that we can have interactive rendering in Maya is rad. And so, if I was going to be, so I'm just going to close out the render view window, so I could go in just like, in a program like Unreal and start blocking out, an environment using these kinds of assets and go from there. And then I have things like, different ground textures, lots of rocks that I've scanned, a lot of miscellaneous objects. So things like, the skull, which was a pretty tricky scan to do. So this is a ram skull that I have. So it turned out to be a pretty cool scan. So if I just go in here and let's render that out. So this required me doing 2 scans just so I could get the top of it and the back of it. And then I had to stitch the 2 scans together in ZBrush. So obviously scanning things is awesome, because to sculpt this from scratch in ZBrush would be pretty tricky. And doing it as a scan is pretty neat. So for things that you can find in the real world, scanning is awesome. Now, aside from all that, I have a lot of plants. So I've got plants, I've got tons of trees. So we can see these are all things that were made in a program called SpeedTree. Anyway, so that's kind of how I would block things out. And if you go back a few ArtJam episodes, you'll see the episodes where I made, let's just go and load that real quick. This image, which was basically using my assets in Maya. But what I want to do now is I want to kind of experiment with my workflow of just Maya, Quixel Mixer, ZBrush, Unreal. So I'm just going to be doing a little bit of experimenting today as opposed to working on an actual project. Violent, what GPU am I using? I'm using a 2080 Ti. Dark Wolf, wish Maya was free. I'm sure everybody does, but Blender's free. So, the last comment from Zintaki, last 2 years, Blender made huge steps. It's true. So I wouldn't say you don't need Maya or Max anymore. It depends how you're stating that, because if you want to work at, ILM or Blizzard or a lot of places, you do need to know a program like Maya. Because ultimately Blender's great for, has a lot of great modeling tools, but when it comes to effects animation, then, you're going to see places like Weta and ILM using Houdini and Maya. If you're talking about character rigging, then again, you're going to see studios using Maya. So once you get into like heavy duty VFX pipelines, that's where Maya is so ingrained in, production pipelines that's why Gnomon is Maya centric, for example. But ultimately, yeah, Blender is definitely awesome. And people are doing very, very cool things with Blender. So if you look at Ian Hubert. So I agree, if you're a student and new to 3D, Blender makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so anyway, like I was saying, I want to experiment a little bit. We're just going to block out some simple stuff. And so let me just think for a second what I'm going to block out. So I've got this terrain in here. Let me just go to layout. Let me think for a second. Like as far as what is realistic to do in the time that we have. Okay, I think I'm gonna just block out something starting with the plane. Now, even though you can, do basic scene layout in, let's say, something like Unreal, and they are adding modeling tools to it, the reality is that there's still a lot of stuff that's not in Unreal from a modeling perspective. So doing scene layout, initial blocking and modeling is something that right now I'm still doing in Maya, although it sounds like they're continuing to plan to add more and more modeling type tools to Unreal. So one day I wouldn't be surprised if we don't need to depend on Maya as much. Let's see, I'm just going to start blocking some stuff in here. Actually, I think I'm going to go for something that's a little bit heavier. And then in Maya, there is a sculpting tool. It's not nearly as good as ZBrush, but that's not what I'm using it for. So I'm going to set the sculpting to just be on the y-axis. So that means it's only going to move polygons up and down. And let's go inside here, and there we go. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just going to block out like a little simple environment area. Let me make this a little bit stronger. And then I'm going to now make a decision that I'm just going to have this camera be my shot camera, meaning that I'm kind of working to the camera. And so for this camera, I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to set a keyframe on it by hitting S. So that means if I move my camera around and go back to frame 1, then it's like a bookmark. It's just a keyframe. It's just the way I find it to be easier than using bookmarks. So, and then I'm just going to switch to the regular perspective camera. So I have 2 cameras in my scene, basically. So there's this free camera, and then there's my shot cam. And the shot cam, we can see, has the this 16 by 9 box, because my scene is set to render at an aspect ratio of 16 by 9, which means, like, if you think of HD, like your television, which is 1920 by 1080, that's a 16 by 9 aspect ratio. And so basically this camera is showing me 16 by 9. And if I were to render an animation out of Unreal, I'd render it out at HD or 1920 by 1080. So working to camera with those guides in here is useful, as opposed to if I'm in my free camera where it's just kind of maximizing it. I don't quite know if that's the right aspect ratio, but it's useful for just seeing my entire scene. So I'm going to now select this again, and I'm going to sculpt on it some more. So just edit mesh, and or actually let's go into here, mesh tools and sculpt tool. So this is just ultimately a really simple surface that doesn't look like much, but once it's got some materials on it, then it'll look cool. So I'm just having some very, very basic stuff there. And that for now is all I really need for the ground. So if I now switch to my shot cam, I can see what I've got there. And then the horizon, I'm going to end up blocking with like rocks and boulders and things like that. So now for that stuff, I'm going to figure out what I want to do with that. But so let's block out some objects for that. So I'm going to go and create a cube for that. Okay. And so with this cube, it's a really, really simple shape, but I'm probably going to subdivide it once. So let's just go and smooth it once, just so it's a simpler shape. And then for it, I think that, just trying to think of, I'll probably just get rid of the bottom. Don't need that. So, and then these simple shapes is basically me just doing layout, meaning that I'm going to be focusing on things like composition with simple shapes. And then these simple objects I can bring into ZBrush and sculpt. And so in the beginning, when I work on something, things look really, really simple. They don't need to be complex geometry. You want to keep it fairly simple because it's easy to make changes. So if I'm looking at my scene, let's say through this camera, you know, I can go and position this thing where I want it, knowing it's eventually going to become this boulder or cliff and whatever. But it's simple enough that I can still go and grab vertices on it if I want to play with, you know, the, you know, composition on this thing, just to get a general shape for it. And then I can basically go back to frame one. And that's just like a block-in, stand-in object. I didn't add noise to the plane, I sculpted it. And so I could add noise to the plane. Maya has a texture deformer, which is really cool. The texture deformer allows you to deform a piece of geometry based on the texture. So it's kind of like a displacement map, but you see it in viewport. Unreal can do it as well. There, it's just called a displacement. But here I sculpted it just so it could be what I wanted. But it is really cool to, if I go in and create, let's say, let me create a heavier one. So let's create another poly mesh in here. So yeah, like if I've got this surface, as we can see, and I go under animation mode in Maya, then under deform, you're going to see there's all these deformers. And when I say a deformer, it means something that deforms or changes the shape of the object. So for example, let's grab a nonlinear deformer. And if I grab something like the twist deformer, and we go and get our wireframe on shaded, and I select the twist deformer, then you can see inside here that, well, that's not great on a plane. Let's go and grab that actually on, let's see, let's grab bend. So I'm going to go to deform, nonlinear, going to bend it. And let me go to curvature on that. And let's go and rotate that deformer. So you can see it's, and let me just, basically deforming that geometry based on this deformer, like so, but that's not the one I want to show you. So if I select the surface and I go out to deform and I grab a texture deformer, and so that's going to be right here. I go in the options, then it's just going to use the regular UVs of the surface to deform it. And if I go to the attribute editor for it, you can specify a texture. So if I go and grab a texture for that, and let me go and grab, let's see, I'm going to go to my maps directory. And I have a directory on my hard drive called maps, which I've added stuff to over many, many years. And so which is going to be textures that I've made, textures that I've downloaded, texture libraries that I've bought, and so forth. So I'm going to go in here to ZBrush Alphas, Filter Forge TIFF. Let's grab one of these. Say something like that. Let's go to the texture deformer. So you can see that it's texturing or deforming the surface like a displacement map, but it's in viewport. And so that's basically what that is. And so with it, if I go in here and I go to the attribute editor for this, and I click on that texture, I can go and grab different textures that are inside here. These are all just made with this procedural program. And I can kind of preview this way. And right now this geometry is fairly low res. So if I choose, I can subdivide it further. So, and smooth it out. But that's my point being, is like you asked if I added noise onto the surface. You can do it with procedural textures. You can do it with file textures and stuff like that. So let's go back out to here. And I'm gonna just start blocking out this scene with different objects inside here. Now I could just go to my library of rocks and cliffs and make something that way, but part of what I want to do today is just play with the workflow of just building all this stuff from scratch just for fun. Jacob, yeah. So the intent is that I'll get this stuff over to ZBrush and then get some things over to Mixer to texture and then get them to Unreal. I don't know if I'll get through all of that stuff. So, so the initial layout is not going to necessarily be all that exciting. So I think I'm going to maybe create another plane. Although I want to have, yeah, that's fine. Create plane. I'm just thinking about what I want to do with this. I wonder if what I want to do is maybe block this out differently. The trick is having time. All right, right, so I'm going to smooth this guy out. Modeling mesh. Okay, then I'm just going to scope this dude a little bit. Jacob, that's a good question. I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that because I haven't necessarily made environments for games, but I have played a lot of games. And I just finished the Ghost of Tsushima expansion, which was awesome, the Island of Iki. But yeah, basically, if you think of games like Uncharted, clearly composition is a big part of environment design for that, where they are choosing where the camera is going to be at specific story points, and therefore they can follow specific composition and art direction, as opposed to moments in the game where it's open world and it's a little bit more free flowing as far as where the character is going to look and going to be. So I think ultimately that is definitely the trick with things that are open world. And what makes it so impressive when you look at games like Uncharted or Ghost of Tsushima or Witcher 3, where it just looks so good from everywhere. Let's see, I'm going to go inside here. And I'm going to deform that guy. But I'll do it with a lattice to make it easier. So a lattice is just a really useful deformation tool, just because you can use fewer points to deform an object. So I don't have to touch hundreds of verts, I can just touch a few. And so that's just allowing me to change the overall shape of this thing. And then once I've done what I want to do, I can just delete history on this thing, which kind of bakes it. So that's just getting me this curved effect inside here. And then I'm not doing things to camera at the moment. I'm just kind of getting things positioned in the scene, and then I can just go and start playing with what I might want the composition to be in here. And one nice thing with Maya is that just from a layout perspective, just the manipulators and being able to like isolate an axis real quickly. So, grabbing the y-axis and channel box to just scale that, or how easy it is to move pivot points around in Maya is convenient. But taking all these objects, once I'm done, and sending them over to ZBrush to sculpt them, they'll all retain their position. And then I can send them all over to Unreal and they'll all retain their position. So it'll be fine. So Maya just becomes like initial block out, and everything is being done to scale, by the way. And so meaning that this dude is 180 centimeters tall, like this little stick here is 180 centimeters tall. And so I'm working at centimeters as my scale, which is the same default units for Unreal. And let me just look over there. Horizon Zero Dawn, I've played a little bit of it. I haven't finished it. I think I played maybe like 5 hours of it or something when it came out, and it was super cool. But played a ton of games last year, but for some reason didn't get back to Horizon. But I will at some point, I'm sure. What other games would I recommend? I mean, there are so many good ones, but the ones that I've played in the last year: Last of Us 1, Last of Us 2, God of War, Uncharted Lost Legacy. All of those are amazing. I'm really looking forward to Diablo 2, the remaster that's coming out at the end of the month. That's pretty exciting. I will definitely be playing that. I'm going to get something a little bit further back that's kind of big. Don't watch a lot of anime, so I've seen the obvious stuff like Akira and Ghost in the Shell, and Fist of the North Star, which is really cool. Legend of the Overfiend, which is ridiculous. Neon Genesis, finally watched that last year. But there's so much more for me to see with that genre. So, but if you have any recommendations, I'm always open to recommendations for stuff. Last of Us 2, yeah, it's crazy. The environments are amazing in The Last of Us 2, dude. It's nuts. Yeah, Naughty Dog is obviously would be a very, very cool place to work. We have a lot of grads there, which is really cool. And teachers from there, which is really cool. What am I looking for? Sculpting, sculpt tool. And then here I'm going down with this. Since I'm not going to be talking like crazy, I'm just going to get the music to be playing a little louder. It's just this Twitch-friendly playlist on Spotify, so it's hit or miss, but it's just like D&D music, really. Oh, I should save. So I'm going to set a new project. Actually, no, let's go and I'm going to make a new project. So in my eMaya projects directory, what is today? Today is the 1st. So I'm going to make a new project, call it ArtJam 090121. eMaya projects accept, and then save scene as. So I'm just making a new Maya project for this. It just makes life easier to know where things are. ArtJam 090121 001. So just so I can version. Witcher 3, yeah, of course, mentioned that. Witcher 3 is amazing. Definitely my favorite game of the last 10 years. Easy. That game is just so damn cool. Wish I had the time to play it again, but it's a long game. Like I think when I finished it, I was at like 120 hours or something like that. So replaying Witcher 3 eventually, after watching the show, which I thought was pretty cool, made me want to play some more. So I'm sure I will eventually. And speaking of Witcher 3, last weekend, finally installed Cyberpunk, figuring like, all right, I got to give it a chance because a friend of mine said like, just try it. And I don't know. I mean, I know it's CD Projekt Red and they made Witcher 3 and all the other Witchers, but I found it to be really weird. There was just something awkward about the first couple hours of Cyberpunk. So I'll try it again later. I don't know what you guys think of Cyberpunk, but it felt really awkward. You know, like a game like Witcher 3 just starts off strong and stays strong, or Ghost of Tsushima, like I just said, I played the recent expansion, like just from the beginning, you're like, this is amazing. And I don't know what it is about Cyberpunk. Anyway, let's see, I'm scanning. Ghost in the Shell, they base the city in Hong Kong. The city has very interesting places. Kowloon Walled City. I have a book on Kowloon Walled City, which is an amazing book. It's just all photos of Kowloon. That place was nuts because, you know, they tore it down, but man, it was like 40,000 people in a city block, something like that. For anybody who hasn't heard of Kowloon, Google Kowloon Walled City and you'll see some amazing photos of what that place was like. It's really surreal. CGM, are there any features that have been implemented in the Maya that you have had a direct influence in? I know you used to be a product demo guy at us. I don't know about if I had much influence. I've obviously beta tested for Power Animator and Maya. I've been using Maya forever. So I definitely have given a lot of feedback on features over the years, back to the first IK system for Power Animator to the first environment tools for Power Animator, and then like XGen for Maya. Like I've betaed things, but you know, whether they listen to my feedback or not. I think I have a closer relationship with Pixelogic, to be honest, because Pixelogic headquarters is where Gnomon is, which is awesome. So their headquarters are upstairs from our gallery. So I'm good friends with those guys, and when we were on campus before COVID, would see them all the time. And next month, when campus reopens, then I look forward to seeing them all the time again. Pixelogic guys are really cool. All right, what am I doing? Also, it's hard for me to know what volume you guys are hearing the music compared to me. So if the music is too loud, let me know, because I have no problem lowering the volume on it. But hopefully you guys get the idea that you know, layout, which is what I'm doing, you know, it doesn't look super pretty, but the nice thing is that since all the geometry is so low res, you know, it's really easy to do. And it's a good exercise, you know, and everything starts off this way, you know, especially in games where like levels are going to be blocked out super low res, where before they build it all out with the hero high res geometry, they're going to block it out low res and just game test it just to make sure it is playing the way they want it to before building the final. And then I'll continue to look through my camera, you know, just to see where I might want some more things, because I think I'm going to probably want to put some more tall things in the upper left corner. So, you know, granted the viewport doesn't look awesome. I can go inside here and do a render test. So I can go and, you know, I don't have any shaders on these things. So what I should do if I'm going to do a render test is I'm just going to select everything that's in here. And I'm going just to assign a generic redshift material to it. So rendering. And so lighting, shading, assign new material, redshift material. And then on this material that was just created, I'm just going to get it to not be so shiny, because by default it's really shiny. So, so basically I can go in here and just sort of experiment with lighting just to get an idea of what I'm doing. So sure, I wish that the viewport looked like this, and once we get into Unreal, then obviously you're going to get this kind of real-time feedback. There is a niceness of doing it in Maya, though. Hopefully you just access to all the modeling tools. The fact that with Redshift, I know I'm just getting a ray traced render right out the box, so I know like all my shadows are accurate and all of that kind of stuff without having to deal with any kind of optimization things. That'll be different in Unreal 5 with Lumen, because then that's going to require a lot less tweaking. But I can use this just as a, composition test. Stop that. And then I may even subdivide this geometry and sculpt on it a little bit further. How many? It's not even that many polygons right now. So I'm going to take this geometry. I'm going to save my scene. And let's subdivide it. Right now it's 2500. So if I subdivide it, it's always multiplied by 4. So if I go to rendering mode and I choose to smooth this thing, now it's going to be 10,000 because it's always times 4. Same as in ZBrush. How many polygons can Unreal handle? In Unreal 4, during the fellowship, we were told to, like, as a rule of thumb, try not to have more than 2 million polys in your level. But with Unreal 5, it seems like because of Nanite, you can have billions of polygons, which is insanity. So, and again, Unreal 5 is in beta, so they recommended that we didn't use it for the fellowship. And the current fellowship that's going on, that Josh is in, they're also using Unreal 4, 2.6 or 2.7. Same reason that it's not recommended to use beta software if you're working on a real project, because it's unsupported until it's fully released next year. So Unreal 5, though, the polygon counts seem to have gone out the window, and it now seems like you can do whatever you want, which is insane. So cool. Like being able to take a 10 million poly mesh from ZBrush and go straight to Unreal with it without having to worry about displacement maps or normal maps is very, very exciting. I look forward to playing with that stuff. So, the actual shapes of these things, I don't know what they will be because I still need to sculpt them. It's really just, basic scene layout. But I think for those of you who are interested in environment art, this is something that is a good thing to experiment with. It's really, really fun. It's like, can you make an image that looks interesting even just with like low-res geometry? And you don't really need to know a lot of modeling tools to do it. Like, hopefully you've noticed that, like, I'm really just moving things around and moving some basic vertices. Because these things, like for those of you who know ZBrush, once they get into ZBrush, I'm going to probably dynamesh them and retopologize them. And, now that I'm thinking about it, how far we're going to get today, I don't know, because it's already been an hour, and maybe I'll just continue this next week. But it's really, really fun to do. And if you have concept art to work from, it's really easy to match concept art based on blocking things out with low-res geometry. POI, poi revoca. That sounds like there might be some French going on there. What is my main job? I started Gnomon a long time ago, and my job with Gnomon now is all sorts of things. So, because when you're in charge of a company, that means you are juggling a lot of stuff. So we have a lot of amazing people at Gnomon, and that handle a lot of things that I don't work on. And then there's certain things like facilities and campus and space and designing our labs and designing our spaces, the education department, new programs. We have a new program that we're going to be announcing soon that I can't talk about yet, that I've been working on with Josh. and trying to make sure that Gnomon stays cool. That's really my job. Stay on top of the industry, stay on top of what artists are doing, what studios are doing, watch movies, play games, continue to be a fan of all this stuff, and just make sure that Gnomon continues to be the school I wished that I could find when I was looking for an art school. So that's really my job when it comes down to it. Hello from Libya. That's awesome. So Good Smile, that's a good name. So yeah, I've got an unusual job, I would say, because it's a lot of different things. But I think the big thing that makes Gnomon unique is that it's an art school that focuses on software and tech. Obviously, we still have the foundation program and all the traditional media foundation classes in art and design. But we are an art school when it comes down to it, and I think what is unique about Gnomon is that it's an art school that is actually run by artists who are like super into this stuff, and I think that's important. I think that's pretty much how all art schools start. It's just, art schools that are 100 years old and those original people maybe aren't around anymore. But I'm still around. But ultimately, Gnomon is not, about me. It's about the many awesome people that help run Gnomon, from all the awesome staff to all the awesome teachers. I mean, we have 85, 90 teachers every term, and they all work in production. So that's what makes Gnomon cool and special. It's not what I know, it's what they know. That having a teacher who's driving in from Naughty Dog or Digital Domain or many studios that our teachers work out, Disney, DreamWorks, Pixamondo, Third Floor, all that stuff. That's what I think is so cool. Will eventually be workshops for current professionals, weekend-based. We have tons of weekend and evening courses. Most of our courses are evenings and the weekends because all of our teachers are working, so most of our teachers can only teach on the evening or weekend. And we have a lot of professionals that take classes. I think we have well over 200 studio artists taking classes this term from the last count that I heard. That's how Gnomon started. So Gnomon started as a training center for studio artists to get together and share information with each other back in the 90s when this stuff was really new. And then we added full-time programs later for people that were new and wanted to get into the industry. So our origin was very much based on professional training for studios. So we were really busy with that in the early days of Gnomon, especially with studios like Disney and DreamWorks, because they were transitioning from 2D to 3D. Because when Gnomon opened, those studios were still predominantly 2D, and then they started transitioning to 3D because of Shrek and Toy Story, and because of that, they had to transition and retrain a lot of artists over to the 3D tools. So we did a lot of that. And we still do. Hey, Adam's in here. Hello, Adam. How did I recruit my teachers when I built Gnomon? I was working as an applications engineer for Alias Wavefront, which was the company that made Power Animator, which was the precursor to Maya. So Maya wasn't out yet when I opened Gnomon in '97. Maya came out in '98. But since my job was to do support and go to studios every day, it was an amazing way to meet people, because every day I was literally driving to a different studio, lugging around this huge, heavy Silicon Graphics workstation, and doing support and meeting artists. And the stuff was so new back then that a lot of people wanted to, everybody was a noob in a way, back in the 90s with all of these new tools that were coming out and changing really quickly. And so I was meeting a lot of people that wanted to, learn more about the technology and the tools. And I was also meeting a lot of the training managers for studios. So when the idea for Gnomon happened, I talked to a lot of the people I was meeting and asked them what they thought about it and if they would, support an idea like that. I asked, the training managers for all the big local studios, which at the time were places like Sony ImageWorks and DreamWorks, etc., if they would allow their artists to teach. So I just wanted to, make sure that it would be supportive, because Gnomon only has worked all this time by the support of the studios, allowing their artists to teach and believing that what we were doing was important for the community. At first, our local community. So it's like you can never try and do anything alone, and you got to be, aware of all the things you're not good at and all the things you don't know, and find people who know more than you do, and get those people to try and help. And so that's, I think, a big part of Gnomon's success, is that I think I accepted very early on how much I didn't know, and part of Gnomon was wanting to be able to take all these classes myself that we were going to start offering with like really cool production artists. Yeah, I remember VeggieTales, and that was definitely like that, or shows like Reboot, like the early days of 3D being used on and TV series. Now, of course, it's common, but yeah, Reboot I think was one of the first ones, which was really cool. Hello, Ravi. I'm just going to scroll to see if I've missed any other stuff. All right, so what am I going to do in the foreground in here? Oh yeah, I subdivided that thing because I was going to do something. That's the problem with talking and working at the same time. Is, my brain is a little jumbled, but I think I'm going to sculpt a little bit more on this. It's still pretty low res, so, but I'll just take it as it is right now. It's starting to feel like a little set. And then the idea here is like, once we get to Unreal, is that we won't be able to like climb over these things, so whatever is in the background, it's fine that it's floating, that you have these gaps, because you'll know you won't go over there. And then I'll obviously have to think about what's behind us as well, but I haven't gotten to that yet. So if I was just doing a still, I wouldn't have to worry about that so much. Hello, Morocco. That's awesome. Morocco is an amazing place. I got to go there like, God, 5 years ago, 2015. It's amazing. Such good food in Marrakesh. So yeah, I was saying that as far as what's behind the camera, that's something that, like, if we look at it through the shot cam, it does matter what's behind the camera, even if you're doing a still, because from a lighting perspective, all of the objects that we can see are reflecting and being influenced by the objects that are behind the camera, both in reflections and light and shadow. So even in a still image, I would model what's behind the camera. But if we're going to bring this into Unreal, then obviously if I want to be able to move around the scene, then that's another reason to have to do it as well. So I will end up figuring out maybe some kind of like enclosed area that we're working on. And that's something that I just haven't gotten to yet. But as far as the ground goes, let's see. I am gonna, yeah, no, I'll sculpt. That brush is too big. So let's see, let's go and invert that down. Let's see what's our stamp look like. That's fine. All right, let's invert that. A little too strong. Might need to subdivide this a little bit more. No, it doesn't matter for now. Okay, that's too strong. So something that's nice that I can do, obviously, is that through my shot cam, I can sculpt. So I'm just gonna decide that there's just like this little ridge here. Which I'm gonna make a little wider. So, I mean, this could be a river, like a little stream. And now that I've kind of positioned it where I want, from the camera's point of view, I can go to this camera and then just extend it out. And again, this is really rough. ZBrush is where I'd end up. You teach 3D in Poland, awesome. Never been to Poland, but it's on the list. So my friend Furio, who's an amazing 3D artist, moved to Poland to work at CD Projekt Red for Cyberpunk. And aside from it being cold, he said it was really cool. Yeah, that's my only thing, is I'm a wimp when it comes to cold weather. All right, let's see. So these are all going to need to be sculpted. I'm now thinking. Montana, awesome. I went fly fishing in Montana my senior year in high school, and I'm just happy that I didn't snag my skin with that hook as it was flying around. Montana's beautiful. You like coding, Mandela. That's awesome. Thank God for people who like coding, because if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have software. So I took a coding class in college, computer science class, and it was way too hard. So it was when I first was trying to find a computer graphics class in the 90s, early 90s. And there was a class called 3D computer graphics at my college. So I took it, and it turned out it was all programming. And I was it was way over my head, so I dropped it. And I was like, I think I'd rather use the tools than make the tools, because I have more of an artist background. But okay, I think that I need to start thinking a little bit about this other stuff that's back here. I don't know if I want the ground plane to just be a single surface like that either. I might want to break that up into a couple pieces. So another thing that I'm thinking about, by the way, as I'm doing this, is I'm thinking about not wanting to have one mesh that's too huge, just because of polygon counts and stuff. So like things like this, I know I can throw, 2K textures on these, and like, 4K texture on that. 4K meaning 4,000 by 4,000 pixels. And knowing that I can sort of like break up texture space where things need to be, and that with LODs in Unreal, that it'll be able to stream things in and out as they get farther away from camera. If I built all of this out of a single mesh, then in ZBrush it would have to be subdivided really quickly, and then it would get tricky to bring that into Unreal as like a single mesh for your whole environment, and it would get harder to texture. And so I'm just sort of breaking things up from the perspective of that. Let's see. So yeah, I think I'm going to get some stuff. I mean, I'll probably end up repurposing things that are going to be behind the camera, but I'm going to grab another plane. Actually, let me just do it this way. Oh, John Carter, when am I going to start doing guitar instructors? That's not going to be me. I have a guitar and I can make noises with a guitar. I am not a very good guitar player, so you will not be hearing me play. So I think that, yeah, music is something I've always been into, guitar and piano. I have a piano and I've been playing that for a while, but I'm not very good because I've spent most of my time on the art side of things, but I love music, so it's something I do for myself, but I wouldn't want to subject you to any of that. So I can keep shapes pretty random because once it's sculpted, I can reposition it to be the way I want it to be. Yeah, it's true. No, I've had that stuff, not in this room, but I'm sure in my other streams you've seen stuff I haven't. I mean, I love playing with that stuff. It's super, super fun. Definitely, I think it was a year and a half ago, I got lost in the world of Ableton. Now, I think before I worry about back here, I think I need to think about breaking up the ground a little bit more. Or do I just leave it as one? Yeah, I'll probably leave it as one because I can always just use a layered shader in Unreal for that. The thing is that I wish I made it bigger. I made it too small. So that's fine. It's simple enough. Actually, be lazy about it. That's awesome. Will Gnomon live on after I retire? I hope so. I mean, obviously, I would love to see Gnomon continue, and that is a weird part of doing something for a long time, is that you do wonder, like, what happens if I get hit by lightning tomorrow? But the nice thing is that now that Gnomon's been around for a while, is that we have so many awesome people at Gnomon that understand the mission and the philosophy that I think Gnomon would be okay. And then my son is a senior in high school as of 2 weeks ago, and he says he wants to go to Gnomon, which is pretty trippy. But also pretty awesome. He's actually super talented. He's been focusing on his art. He's been drawing since he was a kid, and last year he started focusing on Procreate and painting, and he's really gotten good, which is pretty crazy. Will Gnomon be renamed the Alvarez Articat? No. Yeah, definitely didn't want to put my name into it from the beginning. That just seemed like a weird thing to do. Because again, it's not about me. It's about all of the teachers. Wanting to work. Sorry, just trying to get a tool to behave that doesn't want to. What do I think of NFTs? I think it's amazing. I think it's really, really cool. I know a few people have done pretty well with it, and I'm super happy for anything that allows artists to be able to. Thank you for working. Anything that allows artists to make money doing their art. So I think NFTs, regardless of what you think about cryptocurrency and all that kind of stuff, point is that there are a bunch of artists out there that have made money from NFTs selling digital art that they wouldn't have been able to sell or make money off prior. So I think from that perspective, it's awesome. Yeah, I mean, Ash, that's the same with me. Like, my parents didn't really support my interest in art, only out of fear that I wouldn't be able to support myself. You know, I think that it's sensible that they would have that concern. Back in the 80s, you know, when, like, what were you going to do if you were interested in art? And I have a cousin who's a painter and a musician, and, you know, more like a gallery artist. And it's very hard. It was always very hard for him to, you know, I mean, he's happy, but the point is, it's not like he was ever making a lot of money as that type of artist. But our industry is very different. You know, it's the entertainment industry, so it is a very stable industry that's been growing for a century now. And just look at, you know, since COVID, the industry has continued to grow because people are stuck at home and want to watch movies and play video games. It makes sense. So I think that in the scheme of things, I totally understand why my parents were worried about my interest in the arts. But obviously for my son, he knows about Gnomon, he knows about the industry. He's, you know, being my son, he knows about, you know, studios. He's been a huge, like, you know, WoW player for years. He's been to Blizzard a couple times. So, you know, he luckily is aware of the fact that it's a career and that you have to work really, really hard and get really good, but that if you work hard and get good, that, you know, there are a lot of cool jobs out there. For a long time, he wanted to work at Blizzard. That was his dream, but lately it's changed to Weta, his dream at the moment, to move to New Zealand and work there. So we'll see. It's a little far, but Weta's really cool. I've luckily been there a couple times, and dude. NFT stream soon? I don't know what an NFT stream would be, unless you mean talking about NFTs, but I'm not the expert on that stuff, I'd say. So I have accounts, like I have an account on, you know, Super Rare and Nifty Gateway and Foundation. I've bought some NFTs just to support some friends, and back when it was kind of really exploding. I just thought it'd be fun to participate and get some. So you'll find me if you search for my name on like Foundation, you'll find my account and some of the stuff that I've collected. I haven't made any NFTs myself, so I could, because I have an account on Foundation, but I don't know. Yeah, Weta M looks really cool. I mean, there are some crazy looking tools in there. So for sure. Can a non-Gnomon graduate become an instructor at Gnomon? Of course. So I don't know what percentage of our teachers went to Gnomon, but probably the minority. So, I mean, we have a lot of students or grads who have come back to teach, but so many people teach at Gnomon that it's never been a criteria. You know, obviously in the early days of Gnomon, it would have been impossible. And now it's more organic. It's more of just like finding people that are qualified to teach a class. And if they happen to have gone to Gnomon, then that's awesome. Josh Sherman went to Gnomon, who's usually doing the art jams. Right, so I just extended the geometry back a little bit. So I figure with the ground, this isn't a big deal that it's one mesh. I'll retop it in I'll sculpt it in ZBrush, retop it, and then it'll just end up having a tileable texture on it. And so with a tileable texture, I don't have to worry about the text resolution. Because obviously, if we go back to our shot cam, if we're this close to the ground, then it's going to need to be a tileable texture, like a tileable 4K or a tileable 8K. Then now I'm just kind of thinking what's going to be back in this area to close it off. Could be cool to have a cave back there. So basically this could be some kind of like little stream that's coming out of a cave. So I think I'm going to do that. Do I still teach demo reel? I don't, unfortunately. That's now, I gave my section of demo reel to Miguel Ortega, and he's been doing an awesome job with demo reel. So if you Google Miguel Ortega and the Nino, like him and his partner Tran Ma, who also teaches at Gnomon as a mentor for our students as well in the education department, they're amazing. And yeah, I gave up demo reel when my mom died, which was in 2015, because it was end of 2015, just because I had a lot of stuff to deal with my mom dying and a lot of stuff to do, and it was stressful and sad, and I figured I would take some time off, and so I asked Miguel to take it over, and he's so awesome and so talented that I just feel like the students are in really good hands. And so I look forward to getting back to doing that again. But for now, that section is Miguel. I'm doing other things. It's 4 p.m. now. Can you stream other time? It'll be helpful. Sorry for the inconvenience. No problem. Yeah, I mean, we're streaming at a time that it's hard to pick a time that works for everywhere because it's a big planet. And so we found that this time, is obviously a little late for people in Europe, but then for people that are in like Australia, it's the morning. So you kind of just have to compromise, because if we did it, we could also do it in the morning, but then if I did it in the morning LA time, then that would not be a good time for you in India. So let's see about putting a little cave back here. Gnomon is not still partnered with Access in Brazil. That was a while ago, and it was fun for a while, but that was like a 5-year partnership. So it ended a few years ago. reverse U. Do I know any Unreal artists who share their Unreal files free to the public? Well, yeah, go to Marketplace. Marketplace is full of that stuff. So the Unreal launcher, and then on the Unreal launcher, you'll find all sorts of free content. This is going to need to be a little smaller. So again, I'm just blocking out a little cave entrance thing. Simple geometry, because obviously it'll be, as I keep saying, ZBrushed. Doesn't need ground, just that. What do I think about World Creator? World Creator is cool. I haven't used it very much, but I've seen videos on YouTube about it. So, but for terrains, I'm pretty much World Machine and Gaia. So Gaia I'm new with, so I don't know Gaia very well yet. But when I evaluated World Creator a little while ago, meaning like a year and a half ago, I just felt like it didn't offer much more than what I could already do with the tools I was using. So it doesn't mean I didn't like it. I just felt like I didn't need to spend the time learning a new program when what I knew seemed sufficient. Because, you know, you can't spend your time just learning because there's so many programs. And so, you know, it's like World Machine versus Gaia versus View, etc. This thing I need to check out. All right. Need nut face. Need face. And I'll probably get the cave to be a little deeper than that. I also don't need any back faces on this dude. But I'm going to get the cave to be deeper. And maybe we'll turn it around a little bit. And then get rid of the face on the bottom there. Yeah, erosion in World Machine is amazing. It's really, 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 really cool. Let me see. I think I might have missed a couple questions. Yeah, I mean, they're all cool in their own way, really. So, I mean, Gaia has a really nice interface and it's really pretty. Is it mandatory for a VFX artist to know 3D? Yeah. In this day and age, yes, I would say. What do I think about Blender? Blender is awesome. I don't use it because I know Maya. There's no real reason to learn Blender if you know Maya. But if you're new to 3D and picking a program to learn, Blender makes sense because it's free. But Maya's kind of been the industry standard tool for a very long time. Same with Houdini. So it kind of depends on what you want to do. But I think if you're just starting out, definitely Blender makes the most sense. But it's not like there's things that I could do in Blender that I can't do in Maya, so I don't really need to use Blender. Blender has a prettier viewport for sure, but that's not really a reason to switch software. And yeah, the CGM Studios answer, jobs. Yeah, if you want to go work at a studio, then you want to look at what software they're using. So for example, there are certain things that are completely different from one tool to another. So let's say like character rigging or effects. So knowing how to, let's say, do fluid sims in Maya or fluid sims in Houdini, they're different. And so it's not like you can just jump. So if you know it well in Maya, for example, it's not like you can just sit in Houdini and start doing fluid sims. There's going to be a ramp up. So same thing with things like character rigging. So modeling is easy to jump around because the tools are very similar. So if you are just a modeler and you can model really well in Blender, that's less of an issue. And it won't take you that long to pick up Maya. But if you want to get into things like effects or rigging or, or really work at a studio where the entire pipeline is based on Maya, then that's why learning Maya is important. There's a lot of things that Blender's good at. There's a lot of things that it still has a ways to go. All right, let's see. We now have that geometry back there. Not worried about the ground inside the cave because I can fill geometry in there. So now I'm going to switch our view. I'm going to save scene. So I'm going to flip us around and now look at the scene this way to see what things are looking like. So I am going to pick a composition, let's say like this. Select camera. I'm going to put another keyframe on it. So that now if I select my camera, then I can, it's like saving bookmarks, the same thing. So if we were in this scene in Unreal and flipped around, then what would we see looking this way? And objects that I might need to put in there to set dress it, but I probably will end up being able to do that over there by repurposing some of these assets, right? So meaning like once I've sculpted a lot of these things, I'll be able to sort of repurpose them back over there. So I don't know if I really need to do that at the moment. This kind of might be enough of a block out. And so if we now look at what we built for our layout, save our scene. So it's just going to be a simple little environment that we can cruise around. We've laid it out. It seems like there is a cave with a little stream coming out of it. The stream could always terminate in kind of like a little opening right there, or just into the ground. And it's just a little rocky environment that I could then set dress with plants and all that kind of stuff later. So now the point that I decide to transition from Maya to ZBrush, I just want to make sure that I'm kind of all right with what I've blocked out, which is why I'm just going to take a second and look at it. And then I'll have to figure out my, how I'm going to get things over. And then all of these objects, for the most part, are probably going to get, sculpted and retopologized in ZBrush, and then UV'd in ZBrush. And then, so meaning that these surfaces, I don't care about the UVs on them because I'm just going to be sculpting them and re-UVing them. I don't care about the topology. So the fact that they all look weird, like the fact that the ground plane looks weird, Doesn't matter because it's going to get retopologized. So I'm really just using this to block out. And so I think something that might be, interesting is just to put things in context, because I haven't been really showing any like eye candy, is that, the short that I showed earlier, the thing that I made in Unreal, this is how I did that too. So if I go and let's save this for a second, I'm going to switch projects. So I'm going to switch over to my Tartarus project, which is a project for the short. And I'm just scanning the comments. I have a couple monitors, so that's why I keep looking to the left, because that's where the comments are for me. Yeah, Maya is still not free, but it's a lot cheaper than it used to be. Maya, when it came out, was 50 grand. So just keep that in mind. $50,000 in 1998. And then by like 2000, 2001, it dropped down to like 15, then it dropped down to 7. So at least it's not that anymore. All right, so I'm going to switch projects. So if I go to the Tartarus project and I go to, let's say, well, here's like a room. I'm going to open this one. Okay. Okay, so when I started the layout for that project, and here I've already started bringing in some objects, but let's see, where are we? Okay, let me select that. That I did do a couple sketches, a couple drawings to figure out what I was going to need to do for my layout. And so basically this just was a drawing that let me know, let's go and let's select this guy. So that is the side camera. Okay, so you can see inside here, I did this sketch just for me to figure out my environment. And again, this is for the Unreal short. So I knew that he was going to start up on a cliff, and then he was going to ride his horse down the side of the cliff, and then he was going to get to a bridge, and that he would cross the bridge and then enter a cave and then go down some really long stairs. So these maps that I drew in Photoshop basically just allowed me to figure out the layout that I needed to do in Maya, and then started blocking those things out. And so if I go into, let's say, a later scene for this, so let's say I jump forward a few steps. And just give it a second to load. All right, so over here, you can see the geometry that I blocked out for the cliff. And so it's all done to scale. So you can see like I have all these scale references, which is just like this little dummy character. And so I have these around here. So I kind of know like, okay, well, he's going to ride his horse down this little pathway. That's then going to get him to a landing. And then that's going to be the beginning of the bridge. That's going to cross over to this cave entrance. And you can see the initial stages of me blocking out the cave entrance. And so that's basically what this is. And then all of this stuff ended up getting sculpted in ZBrush. So you can see it's very simple geometry. But this kind of layout and modeling is something that, at this point, I'm pretty sure you can't do in Unreal. Like I haven't tried the poly modeling tools in Unreal, but there's just, I know how to do it in Maya, and it's fine to just do it in here. It'd be nice to do it in Unreal eventually, but, again, since I was learning Unreal, I just figured like, I'm just going to do this part in Maya. And the other thing that's in here, which I don't know if I'm doing it yet in this version. Yeah, maybe. Let's try shot 25. No, let's try shot 27, 22. Here we go. So like, here's a shot where you can see that I brought in one of my storyboards. And then basically, I know that in the storyboard, let me just go and hide all, and then show cameras, show image planes. Okay. So this is actually a drawing that I did for Inktober last year, for I think the word was ridge. And that's kind of where this whole short ended up coming from, was this one drawing and this little poem that I wrote that kind of goes with it, where I was basically saying that, from this ridge you can see the cave of forgotten sorrow, is what this little kind of mountain peak is back there. And from this idea of there being something called the Cave of Forgotten Sorrow is where like the idea of my short kind of came from, of him just being on a journey to get to this cave. And there's more story stuff I came up with that in the end isn't really relevant because you don't really notice it in the short, but I kind of needed it as context just to get going. So in Maya, the nice thing too is I can load in my storyboards as different cameras, and then I can use that to basically make sure that things are in the right place, because I really wanted to match the composition that I did in my storyboards for specific shots. And so I'm blocking out my geometry in Maya during my layout to all these different camera angles based on the different storyboards. And so this is shot 23. And then shot 24, which is when he basically gets to the bridge, and just making sure that the layout that I'm doing for this geometry is also matching the layout for that storyboard, and so forth. So, and then obviously once we get to the actual short, which I will go and grab because some of you may have joined a little later. So projects, wrong place, fellowship project, sequence renders, MP4 version 5. And so for this dude, then I'm just going to turn off the sound. And so basically this is all stuff that the block out was done in Maya and then sculpted in ZBrush and then set dressed in Unreal. So you can see this is that one shot. So some of these shots are from the storyboards. Once I got into Unreal, I ended up adding some extra shots because I felt I needed a few more shots of him getting down to the bridge. So like this is a shot that wasn't in my storyboards, but once I was in Unreal moving the camera around, I just found a couple cool shots. And I just felt I needed more time for him to get down there. So yeah, so that's kind of part of the fun, is that, the Maya part is important. You got to get things blocked out so you can start sculpting. The bridge is all same thing, blocked out in Maya and then sculpted in ZBrush. And then textured in Mixer. So I'm not going to show the whole thing, but like say we go towards the end. So these are shots that also are very different than the storyboards, because in the storyboards, if I go and find them, so storyboards, like the storyboard I have when he gets to the cave entrance looks like that. So you can see there's a cave and you can see there's stairs and the idea of statues. But once I actually got it finally assembled in Unreal, then I kind of started, decided to pick a different camera angle based on the lighting that I did, because I ended up wanting it to be nighttime. While some of the shots that are in here, are relatively accurate to the storyboards, so like I've got this over the shoulder shot of him walking across the bridge. And then if we go in here, we can see that that's going to be here. So it ends up changing just a little bit, just sort of like typical back and forth. But anyway, I just wanted to show you guys, where we're going with all of this. So that basically what I did for my project is what we've been doing today. So if I switch back to the project from today and open that up, hopefully you get an idea that, yeah, it looks kind of simplistic and blah now, but hopefully it'll look cooler once I start getting this stuff in ZBrush and get it textured. And it does in the end go relatively quick. So I think that what I need to do is, my coffee is empty. And so I'm going to take a couple minutes to run and get myself a drink. And so while while I'm doing that, I'll just play the short because that's something I can play. That's 3 minutes long, which is about how long I need to run to the kitchen. And so let me just see if I missed any questions. John Carter, I have a big library of scenes, meaning like my asset library, and why don't I put everything into version control? I don't know, just habit. No specific reason, really. What version of Unreal am I using? 4.2.6, 4.2.7. And so I'll start playing with Unreal 5 for fun really soon. All right, so let me just, I'll play the short just so you have something to look at while I'm running to the kitchen, and I'll be back in a couple minutes. All right, that worked out. I've got a drink. 3 minutes back and forth. All right, so Eggs Benedict, just don't use terrain and world partition together. It is completely busted. All right, noted. Sounds like you are an Unreal user. Means good chance you know more than I do. Venture, what was my approach with aligning feet with the terrain in the film? To be honest, it was just winging it and just trying to, some of the mocap clips I used had root motion, and so those are easy because the actual mocap is moving the root of the character, so I didn't have to worry about the feet sliding. For some of the mocap clips, they were not root motion, and also for the horse, and so for that, I really just winged it. I just had to eyeball it, so meaning I had to manually animate the root of the character to the correct speed for the speed at which I wanted the feet to be moving. So it worked. And again, when in a hurry with a tight deadline, it's just like whatever works, and that worked. Also, like a well-positioned rock, like if I saw a point where like you can see a little bit of a slide there, and then it's like put a rock and then you don't see the foot contact point or whatever. So I kind of tried to cheat as much as possible. So like when the guy's going up the stairs at the end, there's actually not a lot of mocap clips out there that I could find of people going up or down stairs. Supposedly one of the reasons is that inertial motion capture suits like the Rococo suit, I guess, don't handle your body going up and down in altitude very well, meaning going up or down stairs. So I guess optical systems are better for something like stairs. And so that's the reason that I was told. So there aren't a lot of mocap clips of people going up and down stairs. So anyway, I found a couple, but it was after I had modeled my stairs that I started looking for mocap clips of a character going up and down stairs, and they didn't quite match, meaning that the mocap the feet weren't landing where my stairs were. So I just made my life easier and just tweaked the model of the stairs to match the mocap, as opposed to hand animating him walking upstairs, because even though I have animated before and I probably could have done that, that would have taken a lot longer to manually animate him than to just change the model of the stairs. So all right. So I guess I'm going to want to go over to ZBrush now. Am I okay with this for now? I think so. I'll probably add more stuff behind it later. So yeah, this isn't necessarily everything that'll be in this scene, but that's okay for now. Boss level studios. Yeah, this is all going to get, ZBrushed, retopped, re-UV'd. So this is all just placeholder. I won't use World Machine for this because it's too small of an area, and so it's a lot easier for me to sculpt this stuff in ZBrush myself. So yeah, so I'm going to start thinking about that. So the first thing I'm going to do, which I like to do to make my life easier, is I'm just going to first save my scene with a new version, which again, I just do manually. And then I'm going to select everything in the scene. I'm going to delete history on it. So delete by type history, so that if I have any construction history nodes in the scene, they're gone. And so, because things like this plane, that doesn't, I mean, a lot of them probably don't, but it doesn't hurt. So, and again, for those of you who don't know Maya, like if I create a sphere in Maya, it has construction history, right? Which means, oh, this one doesn't because construction history is off. Let me make a new one. So if I create a new sphere, this one now has construction history. All that means is I can go and do that, right? It's got history to the node that created it, so I can go and make changes to its subdivisions, right? And so, but those nodes can just sort of dirty up your scene a little bit. And so I'm just going to select everything and delete history. Then the other thing I like to do is make sure that everything is at 0, 0, 0. And that's not the case right now. So, because I could import these things one at a time into ZBrush if I wanted to, but it's kind of easier to try and do them in context with each other. So just kind of bring a bunch of this stuff over there. And so because of that, I want them to retain their correct orientation. And I've had weird things with ZBrush and scale and things moving around and stuff like that. So I find that it makes my life a little bit easier to freeze transform stuff. So even though it means that when it goes into ZBrush or goes into Unreal, that it's not, that 0, 0, 0 doesn't take it to the origin. That's fine. I don't care about that. So I'm going to select all this stuff. And I'm going to modify freeze transform on it. And then something in here that's selected has a key. So probably because I selected things that I didn't need to select. So let me just focus on selecting geometry. Okay. So it didn't want to do it before because I selected everything and I selected like a camera and it didn't want to do it on the camera. Have I tried Rism UV? It's the refresh Hedis never got. Really, I am not familiar with that, but I'm curious, so I'm going to make a new tab and type in a Rism UV and look at it later. The UV mapping 3D software. Cool. Thank you. I'm always into new stuff, so I'm more than happy for you guys to say, hey, you're doing something wrong, or hey, here's a tool you should check out, because that's awesome. Scene looks pretty cool. Is this basically a tutorial on stream, or why do you redo it? Not sure I totally understand your question, but yeah, this isn't a tutorial. This is me just building a scene. So, you know, meaning that starting from a blank scene in Maya, I'm blocked out this scene. That's what we've done so far today. I'm going to then get some stuff over to ZBrush and then start sculpting. And I know at the beginning I said, oh, maybe we'll do, you know, Maya and ZBrush and Quixel and Unreal, because at that point I thought I was going to do something like an asset. But for now we can keep it simple and just pick something small, so we can do that. But let me just first make sure everything is zeroed out. All right, so everything has zeroed out. Nothing has construction history. Everything's cool. Okay. So let's say I go and I start with the ground that's inside here. Let me first just see where it's intersecting stuff. That's all fine. I'm fine with its position. Okay. There's more than one way to get stuff over to ZBrush, obviously. I could export things as this is a new scene that I made today. The scene I had open up in Unreal earlier is something that I thought I was going to import stuff into, but I didn't. So because I was playing around earlier in the stream, just like making rocks and rock shaders and mixer, and then we just kind of went on this different tangent in here. But let's pick an asset, because we're not going to get to the whole thing today. And so instead of me sending everything over to ZBrush, which might not be that much fun to watch, maybe that's something that I should do off camera, maybe before next week, because to get all these objects over there and make sure everything's set up correctly and whatever, that's not fun. So let's take an object or two. So let's say I go and take this guy. So this is the ground, and so, which I might just call the ground. And I'm going to export this dude. So now I can take multiple objects and export them and then split them when I get over to ZBrush. For now, like I said, we're just going to deal with, I think, more just messing around for the next 40 minutes. Let's see. So I'll take this file, export selection. It's fine to just go over as a OBJ is generally what I use. I don't even need a material. So I'm going to export this. So I'm in my ArtJam project. And so in here, it's taking me to the scenes directory in Maya. I'm going to go to the data directory. I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call it to ZBrush, because that's where I'm going. And then I'm just going to call this the ground. And I'll export that. Okay. So now that I've got that, if we go over to ZBrush, which I already have open. So right now, if I go in here and I, let's say, import this piece of geometry. So I'm going to go click on import. I'm going to go to the project I made for day, Maya projects, ArtJam 9121, data to ZBrush. There it is, open. All right. So there is the geometry. I'm going to turn on perspective. So now I've got this in here. And then I think I'm also going to go over to Maya. Oops, not that's this is something I was playing with earlier today. Just a procedural Megascan rock gold shader thing. I wanted to go back to Maya. I'm going to take my little dude and export him. That's really just for scale reference. Dude. And I'm just going to append the dude. All right. And so basically I now have the ground plane geometry and I've got the dude. And so dude's important because it's scale reference. And so I could use a ZBrush character. I could use whatever. It doesn't really matter. The main thing is just having some kind of reference for what sizes are, because when you're sculpting things that are like organic, it's hard to tell scale, because like a small pebble and a big boulder can kind of look the same when under a magnifying glass or whatever. So anyway, it's good to have scale. And let's see, let's go and grab, let's say we'll grab this bigger piece. I'm going to end up doing this again later. This is now just me experimenting. And so now let me just go and import that. Append. And there. Okay. So now that's in here. Let me see. It looks like I missed a couple questions. So I'm just scanning it. Glad to see you on screen again. Maria, yeah, definitely having fun playing with new tools, which is awesome. I thought I was going to get to Unreal today. Haven't. Next week. At what stage of the construction of a short film does Unreal enter? To what extent can you use it alone? Unreal, as I used in the short, is scene assembly. So that means that all of the models I'm making in Maya and ZBrush and texturing and Mixer, and then bringing them together in Unreal for scene assembly and lighting, etc. And then obviously all the camera work. So Unreal is not, so I'm not doing initial blocking in Unreal at this point. Okay, so I've got a couple things in here. So if I was going to start sculpting, let's say, one of these, obviously they need to be subdivided. So the question will become whether I'm going to want to use Dynamesh or not. So if I take something like this rock, it needs to be subdivided. So I'm just going to go out here. And I can do it a couple ways. One is I can just divide it this way, but it is a, if I hide the ground and I hide the dude, it's open on the bottom, right? So if I turn it into something like Dynamesh, then it's going to become solid, which is fine. It's just, it's going to fill the hole on the bottom with geometry. And then that geometry might be wasted polygons if you don't need it, or I may end up removing those polys later. It's a matter of, what's simplest. So for this, I probably will, try to just divide it normally and not really worry about that so much. So if I divide this thing up, then it's obviously going to just turn into this simple object. And then I'm obviously going to need to start making some adjustments on this guy. Subdiv level, just to fix the intersection. And then now I can start to sculpt this thing. Now it's only 50,000 polygons, so it's not super heavy right now, which is fine. But it doesn't need to have so many subdivision levels, so I'll probably just get rid of, you know, a couple of them. So now this is the SDiv1. And then yeah, for sculpting this thing, it's going to be a mix anytime I sculpt something rocky, of doing it with brushes and doing it with alphas and doing it with the move tool. And so the move tool is going to be the easiest, obviously, just for overall shapes. And I don't want it to be, the geometry to be too heavy for that. So I can just kind of get some kind of organic looking shape out of this thing that looks like some kind of big boulder thing. And then I can go a little bit higher. And once I have the generic shape that I might want for it, then I could go and sculpt the hell out of it, but that can be time consuming. So what I'm going to try is I'm going to hide the ground plane for now. And let me subdivide this one more time. And I'm just going to switch over to standard, drag rectangle, play with some alphas. And so I've got a bunch of alphas that are preloaded. I kind of always have these alphas inside here. Sometimes I'll switch them up depending on what I'm going to be sculpting. Because in Lightbox, if I go over to my alpha folder, I've got a lot of different alphas that I've made. And so these are just all like tileable procedural alphas that I made with a plugin for Photoshop called Filter Forge, but you can make these with Substance Designer. So these are really, really cool, and I'll probably play with these a little bit as well. And then if I go up a directory, we can also see I have things like, you know, alphas that are made with World Machine. So these are good for doing like terrains and terrain type stuff. But let me just go and grab one of these and increase the intensity. So if I do this at like a lower resolution, then, you know, I can always go in, and I'm not trying to get the high frequency detail out of it. So I'm going to go into my alpha palette, dock it, not there, there. And let's go and just modify that a little bit. I'm just going to increase the contrast on it. Because if I just drag this thing out, you can see that I've got this thing looking kind of rocky relatively quickly. And so I can then go inside here and smooth some of this out, because once I texture this with Quixel Mixer, that'll give me all the high frequency detail. All this is doing is giving me something that has the general overall shape of like a boulder. And I didn't have to sculpt very much. So the point being that the sculpting that I did was more for silhouette and the overall profile of it. And since I didn't spend a lot of time doing it, I'm not really like attached to it. So I can now grab, you know, another alpha that's inside here, go to the back side, which I haven't really worked on. Don't really like that one. So it's like easy for me to just jump between different ones. And again, I'm just going to smooth this out because we're just getting shapes. I just wanted to have an organic rocky shape that I can then texture in Mixer. And these alphas were all made by just doing, under the alpha palette, you've got grab doc. That grabs the depth information of your ZBrush document window. And so I can just import 3D models in ZBrush, pick an angle, and then grab doc, grab the depth information of that 3D model, and then I have an alpha. So that's how I made all these alphas, is just by doing depth grabs off of photogrammetry scans that I did. And you could just grab Megascan models if you wanted to from Bridge. So like all the stretching that happens, I'm not super worried about. You know, I could always go and mask things out if I wanted to. Not affect, let's say, like the back or the side as much. And then delete the mask and just blur a little bit. But basically, if you just imagine this as like sort of some kind of like rocky element that's in the scene that's then textured with Mixer, it kind of works. Just remember, Mixer is going to add all of your detail. And so I'm getting at a point that this thing might need to be retopologized because the polygons are getting a little stretched. I might retopologize this thing a few times along the way. So, because what you can see is if you look at the wireframe for it, you know, you can kind of see where things are getting a little stretched because the original shape of this thing was from a sphere. And so the more the shape of the geometry deviates from the, you know, or the more the new shape deviates from the original shape, then your topology is going to get wonky, and then your sculpting is going to be less optimized. And I could subdivide this higher, but I don't necessarily need to for the purposes of this, because I want this to look good at a fairly low polygon count, because I don't want to send a 2 million poly model to Unreal. Unreal 5, the workflow will probably change. So with the way this is right now, like if I were to retopologize it, it's 200,000 polys. So let's go down to, and I'm going to skip this song because it's a little bit too majestic sounding. I'm going to go to where it says Z-Remesher in ZBrush. And for this guy, I'm going to put the target to like 15K, because I probably don't need this element to be more than like 15,000 polys. And so if I go and Z-Remesh it, and we'll see what we get. And since it's not super heavy, since it's only 200,000 polys, it's going to remesh quickly. Because if I had subdivided this thing up to 5 million polygons and remeshed it, it'd be slower. Marlowe, is the free council which Gnomon offers for everyone, or is it targeted for people wanting to join Gnomon? Well, the admissions department advises people based on portfolio guidance for students or potential students who are interested in the industry and interested in Gnomon. So that's really the function of the admissions department, is to meet with people and talk about their work and their aspirations, and to make sure that they're making the right decision, whether it's about what job they want to pursue or if Gnomon's the right fit for them. So that kind of counseling is something that the admissions department does for free for anybody who contacts Gnomon. Yeah. All right. So now that this retopologized it, you can see that we've got something that's totally fine and is matching or optimized topology for the geometry that we sculpted. So now it pretty much looks the same as it did when it was 200,000, but it's only 16,000. And so this is something that I could then send over to Mixer to start sculpting on. Or if I wanted to really get it to be more detailed in ZBrush, I could. I would just need to go in and now subdivide this, now that it's been retopologized. Maybe accentuate some of the details that are in it. Maybe some of the cracks. Maybe I want to have more overhangs because it doesn't really have a lot. But if I want to kind of preview what it would look like, I'm just going to divide it a couple times and we can kind of get the idea of what it looks like smoothed. And I think it could use a little sculpting. So I'm going to grab my tablet and hopefully my tablet feels like working. All right, and then clay buildup is what we'll probably use. So now I'm just using damn standard on it. But by just accentuating some of the overhangs and stuff so that it looks like it's got a little bit more of that going on. Which will help when I get into Mixer if I'm going to use like cavity masking and or contour masking, curvature masking, sorry. Then this will help with some of that stuff. But I'm not going to waste a bunch of time doing that. Just, that's the general gist. Just sharpening them up a couple areas. Loud drums, hello. I take it you're a drummer. All right, now that I've sculpted on a little bit, I'm going to remesh it again, because I still want the topology to just match the sculpt. And so since I changed the sculpt, I'll just redo that. And then the next thing I would need to do is UV it, and then we can send it over to Mixer. Uzari, you want to learn hard surface concept, mech kind of design. What advice do I have for you? Well, ZBrush has added a lot of great tools for that, and you have people like Furio Tedeschi that do amazing hard surface work in ZBrush. So I definitely think that that's possible. There's a lot of awesome streams at Z Classroom from Pixelogic. Pixelogic has people Twitch streaming all the time, and there's some really, really good hard surface people there. So I would recommend checking out Pixelogic streams. And when they have the ZBrush Summit in the fall, they do a sculpt off, and they have two categories. There's organic and hard surface, and you can find those from previous years on YouTube. And then the next one is coming up. And if you watch, these are some like really, really good hard surface people with ZBrush, and watching them work, you can get a lot of tips. So if you can watch the sculpt off at the ZBrush Summit for the hard surface category, I think you'll get a lot of good ideas of workflow. All right, so we've got this kind of organic shape. And so I think you can now imagine that, like that didn't take that long, because I'm also talking a lot. And so if we jump back over to Maya, hopefully you guys kind of get the idea of how, over the course of, probably a day, one at a time, I could kind of get most of this stuff blocked out as far as sculpting it in ZBrush, because I'm not sculpting all the detail. I'm relying on alphas. So to me, this is something that I could probably ZBrush in a day. And then Mixer, you try to reuse your materials, like make some smart materials, and based on that I might reuse the same smart material for some of these big boulders and one for the ground, and then like these might all have the same one. So it might take me a few hours to create the smart material in Mixer that I might use for the boulders, for the ground, for the sort of cliffy things. And then once I have them, then applying them and changing them to match each object won't take as much time. So, and then the next step, if we go back to ZBrush, is to then get this thing over to Mixer. But before I would bring it to Mixer, I would need to UV it. So let's do that real quick. So I'm going to go to the Z plugin palette, bring that over here, go to UV master. So again, now since I didn't Dynamesh this thing, you can see it's still open on the bottom. So let me go down to display, and so you can see that. Make it double-sided, right? So it's still open on the bottom. So that's the nice thing, is that Z remesher is going to keep that. If it was Dynamesh, then it would have filled in the bottom. So when I changed the topology, or when I Z remeshed it, it would have remeshed the bottom, and then I'd have to delete those polygons. Anyway, so let's now take this guy and let's export it. So I'm going to do that. Oh yeah, sorry, got to UV it. Another thing, save. See, I'm just not thinking straight when I do a stream. Still a little weirded out by the whole streaming thing, so I appreciate those of you who are hanging on. All right, so I'm going to just save this as our scene. So this is just ArtJam 09/01/21 environment 01. Just saving this out. Okay. I agree with Adam. Paul Gabori is obviously super, super knowledgeable when it comes to the hard surface stuff in ZBrush. All right, so I'm going to go out here. This does not have symmetry, so I'll turn that off, and then I'm going to unwrap it. So because if I take this thing right now, and I go to texture and try and display a texture on it, it's going to say that it requires UVs. There's no UVs on this mesh. It had UVs when I brought it over from Maya, but since I Z-remeshed it, it then lost it. So let's turn that off. So I'm going to go over here to UV Master, and then just like how it's amazing that I was able to hit one button and retopologize this mesh, because that's super, super cool. You used to have to do this one polygon at a time. Now I can go to UV Master and click Unwrap. And then click on Flatten, and I can see what it looks like. So this has now been UV'd. Pretty simple. So I'll unflatten it. So if I now put a texture on this thing, you can see it now can accept a texture. And so this thing is now ready to be textured. So let's turn that off. And I'm going to export this. So I'm going to say export. All right. So now in my data folder, I made a folder called to ZBrush, and now I'm going to create a folder. It's called from ZBrush. And so that was rock test 01. So from ZBrush, rock test 01, and this is 15,000 polygons. This is a habit I have that I name the file with the number of polygons that it is. It's just a weird habit. But it helps me just keep track of polygon counts. All right. And then that model that I just saved to disk, I could bring into Maya to check it in my layout, and I can also bring it into Mixer for texturing. So if I now go into Maya, then I can take all of these objects that I have inside here. So starting with the ground, going down to there. And I'm going to make a new layer. And I'm just going to call this my environment lock-in. So I can hide or show all of that stuff real easy. And then I'm going to import that thing I just exported from ZBrush. And there it is. So now you can see how a single object that looked like that became this sort of organic, rocky boulder thing that really now just needs good textures to make it look cool. And so fairly quickly. So we've got one piece there. And now if we want to bring this into Mixer, so let's load Mixer up. So this is something I was playing with earlier today. We could try using this one just since we are limited on time. Lee Gibbons, hello. 3 hours late, going to have to rewatch. Hope you're doing good. I am doing good, thank you. So yeah, all these end up on YouTube, so definitely understand for those of you who are it's late or you're hungry, gotta bail. I guess we could try this shader and see. Basically what this is, if we just go and hide everything. This is a rock material from Bridge. And so again, this is Quixel Bridge. So if I go into surfaces and I go into rock, let's make this bigger. There are a ton of materials. These are all scans. These are all scan sourced. So these are all based on photogrammetry. So they look real because they are based on photographic input. And if I click on any one of these, then we can see what it looks like. We can make it full screen. And that obviously looks pretty cool. We can see a render of it. We can see what it looks like if it's tiled. Everything that's in Bridge, all of the surfaces are tileable, which is awesome. And most of them are available up to 8K. So there are tons and tons of them. So the thing that's cool is that that's Bridge, but if we're in Mixer over here, and let me just get you guys back so I can see. All right. Then basically in here, if I click on the Online tab in Quixel Mixer, then this is pulling from the same place that I just had in Bridge. So this is the online library of Quixel Megascans. So I can go and browse all these different types of surfaces. Let me say, show me surfaces only. But I'm in Mixer. So what's rad is that it's a 3D texturing program that comes for free with this massive, massive library. And this is just rocks. So I can click over to metals, click over to moss, click over to moss rock. Pretty cool. So if I go to viewport, what I did on this rock is I just imported this Icelandic mossy rock, adjusted the scale, and then layered another one on top of it using a mask. And so basically if I hide what's below, you can see where it's appearing in certain nooks and crannies based on curvature. And then I took a solid color and used curvature masking to just get this dark color. And then I did that both in the edges and in the cracks. And then I just was experimenting with layering in this sort of brass shader. Just looks like this kind of like nugget. I don't know if it's going to work for what we just did in ZBrush, but we can try it. So if we want to try it just to see how that works and how that looks, this guy is already tested or saved, but I'm going to save it again. Okay, I'm going to go to Setup, and then in the Setup tab, it's already set to Custom Model. So I'm going to import the model that we just exported from ZBrush. It's probably going to need to be adjusted as far as scale, because I know that this rock is actually like super tiny in world scale or world space, and the one we made is kind of big compared to a person. So Maya projects, ArtJam, data from ZBrush. All right, there's the OBJ. Okay, so you can see we have a definite scale issue. So I'm going to deal with that one at a time. All right, so first for this guy, Icelandic mossy rock. So the way that this is being placed is based on a projection as opposed to UVs. I could do it based on UVs though, because there are no seams on the UVs on this model. So meaning that if I go into Maya and I select this mesh and I go to Window, Modeling, UV Editor, you can see what the UVs look like. There's no seams. So since it has no seams, I would be safe in Mixer to switch it from a box projection to just tiling. And so now it's just tiling this texture one time across that surface. And so you can see that our object actually kind of looks okay. Doesn't really look that bad. And that's just a straight texture without any blending of anything. So that's the funny thing with organic things, is that, you know, you just do some kind of random sculpting and you're really thinking about silhouette. And as long as you have a good texture, you can get away with a lot. So this is repeating one time. And then we can go and play with the lighting inside here. In Mixer, it's just Shift and the right mouse button allows me to rotate that around. So I can adjust the repeats a little bit if I want to see what this looks like repeating twice because of the scale issue. I can adjust the strength of the normal map. I can enable displacement mapping if I want to, but the thing is I don't want to, because I don't want to be using displacement maps on all of my objects once I get to Unreal. If I was doing this for Maya and rendering with Redshift, then I might. And so I'm now going to turn that off. I'm going to turn the next one on and disable its mask. So this one also has a tiling issue. So for that one, I'm also going to switch it to tiling. And I'm going to rotate it around to see if we can find a rotation angle that works for this guy. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. So really I'm just messing around to see if I can find a position of this that looks all right. Jacob, for the solid color I added, is there a gradation or variation? No, it's just a solid color. It'd be better if it was actually a texture and not a solid color. I was just experimenting. All right, so that's now layered on top of this rock, but it's a little crunchy, so I'll probably want to play with the mask a little bit more and drink something. Starting to lose my voice. So the mask, let's try a different mask. Right now I have a curvature mask on it, but I'm going to add another mask. I'm going to add a noise. I'm going to set this noise to multiply. So now I can just kind of play with how one texture is blending on top of the other. Okay. And then this, again, is a solid color that's using a curvature mask just to darken the high points. Might not need the second one. This one is darkening the cracks, but you can see that worked for that other object, but for this one it doesn't look great. So I'm going to select that and soften it out a little bit. And let's see if this brass is even worth using. So this is going on the high points, but instead of it being everywhere, I'm going to add another mask onto this guy. So it's just in a couple spots. Yeah, I don't know. Don't know if I like that. But, and then it probably doesn't need all of that. But I think just as a quick demo, you kind of get the idea of the sort of process of going from Maya to ZBrush and then ZBrush to Mixer. And so if we decided to start from scratch in here, because I obviously loaded something that already had stuff on it, it would be very straightforward. If I create a new mix, and I'm just going to call it test. Okay, don't save changes. I'm going to switch over to custom model and grab that model again. And you can see here if I go to local library, actually I'm going to go, I'm going to stay local because it's going to be faster. We don't have to download anything. So I'm just going to go and scroll and grab something to use as like my base layer. Don't know if this one's going to work really well, but we'll try it. This layered cliff. And then I'm going to switch this over to tiling. And so it's just nice to have this stuff built in to just so quickly, you know, experiment. And if I don't feel like this is going to be a good start point, it's really easy to just be like, nope, don't like that one. Let's go back to the local library, grab another one. Take this guy. And then I can go in and start layering things on top. So if I go and grab, let's say something in here like this darker dude. Which actually already has a better sort of rock feel to it. And then for this guy, if I add a mask stack, and then let's say we use something like normal, then basically I'm blending these two together. So you can see the base, and then the second one coming in from the side. And then ultimately, as a rocky thing that's, let's say, that's going to be on the side of my environment, like over there, you know, it's kind of fine. So I wouldn't overthink it, to be honest. Meaning, I'd probably stop at this point, and once I get into my scene and get everything blocked out, a lot of these things get hidden by plants and trees and whatever. So this is kind of fine for this just to be this kind of like rocky object. So that's why I'm just kind of like moving my camera back to think about where this thing was in frame. And then looking at it and being like, yeah, that's probably fine for that one. And then start blocking out the whole scene. And then I might retexture a couple objects once I get towards the end and realize, okay, the texture on that one looks a little funny. So I'll keep all of these mixer project files for all of them. And be careful about naming so it's easy to find them again later. Anyway, that is basically the process. So I think if we jump over to Maya, we've blocked out an entire scene. We've taken one of these objects, sculpted in ZBrush, and then taking that matte mesh over to Mixer and textured it. And so now just imagine how long it took us to take this object and ZBrush it and texture it. Not really that long. So if that is, let's say, 10 minutes, then multiply it by the amount of objects in here. So like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, whatever. So the whole thing is probably like 3 or 4 hours. And then I would get over to Unreal. So yeah, that's basically my process for blocking things out. And then we'll see if we keep working on this scene next week. Maybe. But there you go. So I definitely appreciate you guys hanging out with me and watching me play with Maya and ZBrush and Mixer. And hopefully some of it was interesting. I'm just going to scan and before we sign off, see if I've just missed any questions, because I probably have. Maria, your process is similar to mine, but you render one frame in the 3D scene without textures and then paint using Photoshop to create a more stylized result. That's cool. I've definitely seen people work that way, and that's awesome. Do I know what the 2x2 stands for in the materials? Yeah, 2x2 meters. And so that has to do with scale and bridge. So most of the ship surfaces in bridge are 1x1 meter. And so some of them will say 2x2 or 4x4, which means it's a scan of a larger area. All right, well, cool. Well, again, thank you everybody for hanging out. So I'm still getting the hang of this whole streaming thing, but I think slowly getting used to it. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hopefully I can keep playing with the scene between now and next week. Gnomon's just busy because we're reopening campus for October, which is exciting. I was actually there this morning, and it's pretty awesome that we're all finally going to be on campus again in just a little over a month. So there's obviously lots to do to get ready for that. So that's really what everybody at Gnomon was working really hard right now, just making sure we have an awesome fall and welcome all of our students back and all the cool stuff that comes with it. So, but these streams have been cool, and it's one thing out of COVID is we've started doing a lot more streaming, and I know that even after we reopened campus, we plan to continue all of the streams that we've been doing because it's fun and allows us to sort of do more events than we were used to do when we only did them on campus. So anyway, thank you everybody for watching. Hope you guys all have a good evening, good day, based on what time it is where you're at. And I will see you all next week on the next stream. It'll be the last one where it's just me, and then we'll have Josh back the week after. So, all right, everybody, have a good day. And talk to y'all later.